Yum.
What kind of coffee you guys drinking? Is that a latte over there, Adi?
That's exactly a latte. Good eye. Good eye.
I do an espresso in mid-afternoon. So in the morning I do the coffee, just the filter coffee. Afternoon I do an espresso. Then I have like one more session of coffee in the late afternoon.
That's a lot of coffee.
3 times a day. Yeah.
Is it just a straight espresso shot? Is that?
Yeah, I do my coffee black. I mean,
wow.
really dry, like no sugar, no cream, no milk. I just like it black. And
Nice.
And how about you guys? How about you, Jess?
Mine is flat white. So
flat white. Nice.
Yeah, flat white. So it's just like latte but less milk. So yeah, it's pretty good.
Very nice. Yeah, I do flat white sometimes. Yeah, Starbucks you do that. Yes. Eric?
Yeah, I do a cold brew. I just have these like pre-made cold brews in my fridge. I can just get them real quick in between meetings, and I like a lot of mine. This is actually a little darker than I normally do. I get made fun of sometimes for it looks like chocolate milk. It's coffee.
I have to admit, it's been very hot here in the last week or two in the Bay Area, so I have been drinking more cold brews than I usually do. Sometimes it's hard to be in the mood for a hot drink when it's hot outside. So it's nice. Cool. So this is the second edition of Benchmarks and Brews. We are back at the MSF, and as you can see, we have 2 new people that are joining us, Jessica and Eric. We have a pretty cool story I'd like to tell. So maybe before we start, we should get an intro from Jessica and Eric, like really briefly, and what you guys are doing, and then we'll get into the cool story.
I'm Jessica. I run the Dimension efforts for Metadata. So I do a lot of marketing strategy, and then also I'm the one executing it, running paid campaigns. And then on top of that, we have a lot of marketing collaterals, and then webinars, case studies, and all of that. So yeah, that's.
My name's Eric. I'm an account executive here at Metadata, and I'm just feeding off of all the leads that this awesome team brings me. Trying to sell some software, help some marketers grow pipeline and revenue.
Cool. So for anyone listening to us, you probably right now are going, how come we have a salesperson in this podcast? These guys, they don't know anything about marketing or benchmarks, but we actually do have a story here. So that's why I'm very excited. So maybe we'll start. So we'll start with that. I hear from the sales team and the company a lot of times they have ideas, or they're not happy about the lead quality, or this or that. And I had this kind of request from Eric. I was saying so many words a few weeks ago. And we're a small company, we're a small team. So I'm like, you know what? You got an idea? You should. I think you should run it. So Eric, do you mind walking us through the idea you had and how we started this process?
Yeah, I'm getting a little anxiety just thinking about it right now, actually, because we were on a team meeting, and I forget who asked the question, but somebody was like, how can we improve the business or accelerate sales cycles or something like that? And I shared that I had like a few audience targeting ideas and a few messaging ideas that have been working well for me in like my sales conversations that I thought might be good to try out in our ads or some of our content. And what I did not expect was that Abdallah offered me to run some campaigns using Metadata's platform. And I immediately panicked and did not feel ready for that, but worked out pretty well. Good enough that I actually made it on a podcast here to talk about it. And definitely want to shout out Jess for helping me, which I'm sure we'll get more into the story, but
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you made the podcast because, well, you did it, which is awesome, and you have some cool results to show. Did you guys want to talk? Maybe Jessica, maybe walk us through the setup you did for Eric, and I also want to know really how much involved he was in the execution, and like how much was he hands-on, like versus hands-off, in the process.
Yeah, so at first we just up on a call with me and Eric, and then we had a really nice conversation. Obviously, me as the marketing person who run the campaign strategy and then also executing it, it just makes sense for me to help. But at the same time, I don't want to be like telling Eric, this is what you should be doing. This is how you should do the audiences. I want Eric to be creative and then try his way. So we came up with this setup of just having one campaign and then one audience, but we want to test out 3 different messaging. So one of the problems that Eric pointed out, it's about the messaging, how we deliver the message, because some of the leads that are coming in, they are great leads, but they don't know the platform really well. So I was always wondering, how did you deliver the message to the leads? They came in, but they don't know the platform really well. They don't even know what they want. They don't even know what they need. So that's why we came up with this one audience where we just combine everything together. And then we have 3 different content that we test out.
Abdallah, this is going back to our last conversation. The most important thing when you start experimenting in marketing is to adhere to proper quantitative principles of testing. And in your case, you were able to basically keep constant the audience, which gave you a lot of insights as to the messaging, because you didn't. So a lot of marketers, what they would do is switch from this audience to that audience, or this audience is not working for me. I'm just switching, like constantly feeding the machine of audiences with more audiences. You were, no, let's take a step back. This audience is good for us. We just want to hone in on messaging and test it out. Amazing. Continue.
Yeah. It was a great chat, because at first we thought, oh, we should try this messaging, and then we just decided if we segment too narrow, it's not going to be good for the audiences. And then also Eric at that time, Abdallah said, okay, you have this amount of budget, which is 10K. We didn't have a lot of time, but especially having small audiences. So we decided, let's just do one. We combine it, but we test out the messaging.
Eric, what's normally your gambling strategies when you're just gambling in real life? Is it, let's start small and see how my night plays out, or I'm trying to go big in the first hour?
Yeah, I usually like to go pretty big. I mean, I don't actually gamble like real money, but I like to take risks. I like to, have some fun. And I want to kind of double click on what Jess said that I learned from this. I guess my original idea was that we would have like really segmented audiences aligned with messaging that was more related to the type of audience. But I learned pretty quickly that the audience sizes were too small, and it would have just burned through our budget. And I only had a certain amount of budget. I only had so much time, which is another constraint that I had not really taken into consideration as much when I'm like asking for these big asks as a salesperson, like, marketing, why aren't you doing this? It seems so logical, but there's so many constraints within that. And I guess speaking to, I think it's important to talk about some of the goals for this too, was, of course, for me, I was like, I want good opportunities. I want qualified opportunities that I can work and make some money to these point there. And so one of the things that I kind of went with is, as I was thinking about how I do outbound, and I do segment like by different audiences that I think are going to be higher intent. I look at some of the tools that we have. I look in Salesforce at, like, for example, closed lost opportunities was one of the ones that we went after, as that's been like one of my most successful ways of booking meetings personally. But when we did that, the audience was too small. And then I was like, well, what if we try like G2 intent, I think was another one, or people that have been on the website. And all these audiences individually were too small. So just helped kind of guide me through grouping those together in metadata to make a larger audience. And there were others in there that we could dive into, but I think that was one of my first takeaways. Was pretty tough.
What were your core kind of messaging guidelines? What were you trying to make sure that the messaging hits on as far as your creatives, your ads to those audiences?
Yeah, good question. So that, I guess that's kind of how the conversation came up. And I was, at least, so Jess kind of walked me through picking the audience first to think about what the message would be, which was helpful. And then based on that audience, so we picked basically people that based on the different audience types that had some familiarity with metadata as a brand. And to what Abdallah was mentioning earlier, a lot of the leads that I'll get first meetings, they're very familiar with metadata, and something about our ad like piqued their interest, but they're not as familiar with specifically how we help or how we fit into like their tech stack. So I really tried to get specific with the things that I know are like the reasons why people buy metadata, which in some cases worked, in some cases failed, which I'm sure we'll get into the kind of the results of these different experiments, these different tests that came up. But I wanted to be as specific as possible so that the conversation would flow more easily. I didn't have to like start from scratch when I got on the meeting, which I have had a few of these meetings, and that did pan out. So happy to say that.
All right.
So maybe let's start by the audience to just show how, because I know he was very involved in the audience creation.
Yeah, I would say what I love about Eric's experiments, when I told him like we cannot really segment too narrow, it's like, okay, let's try as broad as possible, and then also brought in closed laws, which is what we usually exclude. And it's like, I don't mind having these people see our ads again. They might want to try again, right? So we have closed laws, and then website visitors, and then G2 the last 90 days, and then demand, and then we have Spotlight, which is our product, our cool product. And then MQL date, this is also the last 2 years. It's customers, and then LinkedIn page visit 180 days. Have our tier ABC from Salesforce, and then navigate, tour engage, and then some member interest. This is targeting from LinkedIn, people who have interest in, and then complete category.
So we're basically saying we're taking all of the middle of the funnel and some that are what would classically be called the bottom of the funnel, and retargeting them all together. Overall, 85,000. Classic middle of the funnel campaign.
Yeah, obviously on top of that, we also layer with job function and then seniority, which is director plus, and then employee size has to be 50 plus, 10,000. Yeah, and then our exclusion is pretty simple. Just we want to exclude entry level, unpaid, and training. And then we got 85K audience size. It's pretty
nice. That's a good number to start with.
Yeah,
absolutely. And this, and you worked, Eric, I'm assuming you worked pretty close with Jessica on these audience types. Like you came up with some, or she came up with some, and you end up with that number, with those filters.
Yeah, and I wanted these all to be, like I said earlier, like unique messaging for each one, but some of these audience sizes were just too small. And it was interesting to see how I did add some of these things into the audience, but it was mostly Jess in the driver's seat. But I was impressed with how quickly we were able to pull these. Like for the Salesforce one, for example, I've never ran a campaign before, so I don't know what it's actually like building that type of audience without metadata. But from at least my conversations with other marketers, it's pretty tough to do something like that. But we literally did it in like maybe 30 seconds. I'd be curious, you guys, how you think about that. Like, would you have been able to do that without metadata? Like using LinkedIn's native targeting, could you pull a list of closed loss opportunities, or how would you go about that? Like in the...
So there are technical answers to your questions and more cybersecurity answers to it. Can you technically connect and make it so that LinkedIn is able to access your ops? Yes. Would 9.9 out of 10 CISOs or CIOs be okay with you doing that? Absolutely. So this is another cool thing that, like, the most common way that other people would do that would be to run a report in Salesforce, export a CSV with just the account names and domains, and upload that report. And we'll call that report opportunities. So not only is there a giant kind of InfoSec issue with working like that, GDPR, all type of stuff like that, it's a hassle. You just download and upload and download and upload. Now you could connect it automatically. but I wouldn't. In most orgs I've worked with, they won't allow ops opportunities as an object to access LinkedIn accounts.
It's a big hassle. Yeah, it would be like as what Ali said, import and export. On top of that, too, even if you do that, and it's quite a hassle, the lists are fairly static. So then, if you want to run the same campaign 3 months later, like for example, let's say you run it, you have awesome results. You want to like reproduce it in 3 months. You probably have to do the process again because the information you're collecting now is stale. So it really is a hassle. Yeah. So I love how we can create audiences across also sources, right? Like in your list you have there, it's looking at a few sources. You look at the mix of actually account lists and people's lists from different things. So it's pretty nice. Yeah. It's anyone who has done this in the past would know that this is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, definitely. I also used to work at agencies, so I know the struggle of jumping from one platform to another just to create the same audience. So yeah, it's definitely pretty easy in metadata because now you have your audience from G2 and then from Salesforce, from HubSpot. But we create it in metadata pretty easy. It's like 15 minutes. Yeah.
Cool. So now you guys have your audiences. The next step was creating the ad creatives or the copy.
Yeah, so I did 3 different ads that we were testing, and this was actually one of my big learnings. I wanted to do 4 or 5, and time constraints. I have another job. This is something I'm doing as a side project. But what I created was, or with Jess's help, we had a little designer help to make these look a lot nicer. But we basically found this quote that I've noticed that resonates with the audience. Like, this is a big reason that people buy metadata, is that it's an alternative to hiring a bunch of performance marketers or an agency. And so this message I thought would really resonate. We'll get into the results of that. I'll speak to a couple of other things where this is another image that I put together. And honestly, this is another thing I learned. Like, I still was not happy with the way that this image looked, but again, time constraints, I just needed to get this done. I had a deadline. So there was improvements that I wanted to make to this, but just did not have the time.
It's worth noting that our CEO was waiting for these results too. So there was added pressure because the CEO was in that call when you proposed that you can do this. So he was waiting for results. So that
I don't believe I ever had a campaign in my career that I didn't think after, I could have added this tiny improvement and it would have been better. So
yeah,
you're not this means now you're a real marketer.
Oh yeah. Yeah, what's the saying? Done is better than perfect.
Speed to launch is important. It really is, right? Like running stuff, launching stuff is important. Trying to perfect stuff.
A live campaign will always perform better than the one on your Figma. The one on your Figma is likely not going to generate leads.
Almost for sure it will not. If it can, then we should find out. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. So let's see. Okay. So you had the video. You had this nice table like comparison, sorry, you had the code, not the video. Sorry.
Yeah, and I had this video, which this is actually a slide deck that I walk through on calls, and I've always gotten like really good feedback on it. And I thought this would also be like a kind of scroll stopper too, of which ad do you think performs best. And now I guess we can get into some of the results.
Yeah. So hold on. So before you do that, we have 3 different ads with the same audience. I'm assuming you guys started the experiment with like equal spend across the ads, right, Jessica? I'm assuming like we didn't favor any one ad over the other, at least initially. Is that correct? I'm assuming yes. I think Jessica is having issues. If you had to guess before you started the experiment, which ad creative would you have guessed would have been your big success story?
I definitely would have thought it was the video. I thought that this like would be more engaging, and like I mentioned, like this really hits home for people when I go through this live with them and we have like a discussion about it. And yeah, I don't know. I thought that would be the most engaging.
And the comparison one?
The comparison one I also thought would be really great. I think, my thought on this was these are the things that people just like rave about metadata for, is like when they don't have it, all these things become very difficult. But the actual results were surprising.
Yeah, let's go into that. Yeah, let's go into the actual results, because you ran this for like a week, right? The
Yep.
budget of $10,000, like roughly. So what were the let's go over the results. And
Yeah.
maybe maybe you can zoom in on the screen to make sure people.
Yeah, so the main results, and I feel like actually if we back up for a second too to talk about like how this was structured, I'm kind of curious your guys' perspective on how this would have been done otherwise, because again, this was my first time doing this. But when I launched these campaigns, all I had to do was add them to a budget group and press go. And the pacing, like everything was just done for me. I didn't have to like think about that, which I don't know what would have happened otherwise. But eventually what happened was, if we looked at the results, clearly there was a winner. This one had way more leads. My video that I thought was going to be the best only got one lead. Granted, it was a good lead. I met with that woman yesterday, and
Okay,
it was a really good fit. And that's now a qualified opportunity that's moving through.
Which by the way, like not interrupt, but like because this campaign was so fresh, we can't look right now at leads as the indicator. But really, we might find out in a few weeks that the campaign was lower leads. Maybe it's better because we see pipeline from that, right? Or close one eventually, right? So, but from lead indicators right now, yeah, you would pick the one with the more leads, but you don't actually know until probably a few weeks from now which one really was the best one.
And also, we should note that it is highly plausible that people also viewed the video and then converted on the other end. So it's always the best to try out multiple formats in your campaign and let them kind of resolve themselves. And I want to say something, Eric, let's talk about the dread of native bidding if you didn't have metadata in a budget group. So let's take a minute to explain what happens here. Budget groups basically replaces the bidding anxiety. If you do not have budget groups, you kind of basically need to daily check your spend on LinkedIn and adjust it and make it so that you are completely in tune to which one of your campaigns is the most performing and you're reacting quickly. And the nice thing about metadata is that you get the budget groups to do that for you. And then once a week, maybe you look at the logs. Do you want to take a look at the logs? Let's see them live. Click on settings to your left-hand side. So let me show you you have settings on the, there you go. You can add the shortcut as well from there. And you're saying, how did this all happen automatically? This is exactly how. So your employees, the budget groups, were working hard at night to make sure that you're not wasting any dollar for a campaign that's not working, or not overspending on ones that should be maybe tempered down compared to other ones.
Yeah, and then the one campaign, the video one, was paused because we have our auto pause rules set up. So you see that that says CPL is higher than 1,500. So that one experiment that was paused because we set the rules of if the lead is higher than 1,500, it's going to be automatically paused. So that's why
probably the video next time I would probably set it up as a brand awareness campaign and not count on it generating leads as kind of the full thing, and just bring it a few $100s, give it a few $100s to run for pure views, and that's it.
And we can look at the video even like even though it wasn't for brand awareness, and just see like how was it for click rate, and stuff like that. Was it getting some views and high click rates? Because it could be that it was getting views, but not high conversion rate because it's a video, right? Maybe people were waiting, thinking about it. So there's a lot of things you can do with this. But you clearly do have a winner in terms of leads and CPL. And I think Jessica will confirm this. I mean, your CPL for this experiment or for this campaign was quite respectable, actually. At a blended average of $400 for us, at least, for a type of lead that we get. That's very respectable, actually. It's pretty cool.
Eric, How does it feel to know that every lead you need to speak to as an account executive costs your org roughly $400 to generate?
I guess it makes me respect it a lot more. I mean, I never knew exactly what the CPL was on those, so I am coming into all these meetings with a little bit more, or really a lot more respect for the marketing team, and like more, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, I want to give them all a much better shot, and like I want, I want to make it worth the effort and the time that took to actually get one of those meetings booked on my calendar that I really took for granted prior to this, I guess.
So every one of those meetings on your calendar cost Metadata around, give or take, anywhere from $300 to $450. That's the monetary value of putting an ICP target on your calendar.
Yeah, what's kind of crazy about this too is when we look at like the spend that was allocated towards these, is there, if we didn't shut this off, we probably would have blown a lot more money on that, and the budget was just like more allocated to these other ones. So am I right to assume that if this was run natively, that like all the budget would have been split pretty evenly?
So in a nutshell, yes. I won't go into the machinations of why. It would have probably stopped at some point, but it would have spent way more until it would have realized that it's overspending and under-delivering. So to your question, yes. Without metadata, you would have probably spent, I would say, $2,500 on the video, rough estimation.
And we see this with people that come to us who do the audit with us. Almost every audit we do, we find a few campaigns in LinkedIn or whatever, Facebook, that are overspending, even though they are the least performing ones. So when we do the audits, we see this all the time. That's actually one of the big eye opener when people are doing an audit. That's why, yeah. So yes, it's an awesome question. Again, it's very funny, I find, with metadata users versus non-metadata users. I was trained on running ads on metadata, so to me, this is the only way to do it. But believe it or not, people that have been trained to run ads natively have a hard time adjusting to this, or sometimes they even fight it, which to me is a puzzle, because to me it's a lot easier and cleaner here. But there is definitely that fight that we have with users who we're trying to convince to use this platform. Sometimes they're like, I know how to do it natively, but you actually don't. You think you do, but you're giving all the control for the native channel to do everything for you. And it's not to make sound bad, but you can't trust them really, right? Whereas here, at least, whether you trust us or not, you can see the results, right? And you can see the logs on what's going on. But it really is a fight for people that have been trained for 10, 20 years or more on the native channels to be willing to even have a look at this sometimes. So anyways, that's my little spiel about that. Cool. Yeah, this is very cool. I was going to say, actually, if you go back, Jessica, on this one, the other point that I think is relevant, and I think, Eric, you can start to look into, I just want to show the impression numbers. This is not a campaign for impressions, but if you look at the impression numbers here, this is an amazing scale you did in a week, really, in your experiment. You were able to test at scale which of the messages potentially resonate the best, right? You can see the impressions is almost, what's that, 60,000 impressions, was 400 clicks. So you now have data that can help you in your other outbound campaign, because, as a rep, even if you're automating your processes with Apollo or Outreach or whoever, you can only send so many emails a day, right? There's rules against that, right? But here, you kind of, in 1 week, you kind of have impressions that are kind of telling you, and results that kind of tell you, maybe this is the type of message or format I should use in some of my email campaigns, right? Or some of your outreach campaign, even on LinkedIn in the message or so forth, right? So that's also the big insight that I think helps you guys see at scale, be able to test at scale the messages and the types of messages that perhaps will work if you're doing an outbound campaign, right? I don't know if it will work exactly the same way or not in this an ad, but I'm going to infer that this was viewed by so many people. Have data that tells you this is maybe like for example, I should use a quote in my email, right? Or I should try like one email of my flow should have a quote something. So to me it's really cool, and I would love to maybe have a talk with you maybe in a month from now and see whether you took any of these lessons and actually applied it in some other campaigns, and had results. So
yeah, that's a great call out. I actually didn't think about this until just now. But if we think of, now that I'm thinking about this, the audience that this was going towards, I think our message was probably misaligned in terms of like, so both of these campaigns, I would say, are more like user focused, and our audience was director plus. So if we look at this again, this is very much director plus language of. And now I'm actually going to immediately take this into my calls, my conversations with marketing leaders. I don't need to get in the weeds as much on how the product works and what a user would really care about, but this is more at higher level of what an executive is going to care about is.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you're saying directors and above don't care about which one of the ads is performing better? Obviously, they just care about generating more pipelines so they can make their weekly meeting like a hero. And this ad talks about it. The other ones talk about features that are super important for users. And this is maybe something to any one of the marketers listening to this. Make sure you have your messaging clearly differentiate between your users and your decision makers. They have very different outlooks on life.
Oh yeah, that's huge actually in the sales process too. I've literally had directors and VPs. I've had two of them now. One of them was a customer of ours, and he's like, I think senior director of marketing. I won't say the name. I don't know if we have permission to say that, but he's been a customer for like 3 or 4 years at least. And I was asking him like what he likes about the product, and he was like, I don't really care how it's done. He's like, I just know that I talk to our rep at Metadata and my CPL gets lower. And I don't really care if it's the AI doing it or the person like Jess maybe sitting there and helping to execute the campaigns. And then I literally had a conversation with another guy like 2 weeks ago that he was considering us as a replacement for their agency. He was pretty unhappy with that. And I was over here like demoing the platform, and he literally was like, I don't really care. Like he's like, I don't care if it's your platform or if it's somebody overseas like doing all the work. I just want our results to be better. And then that changed the course of the rest of our conversation. And we did eventually with one of the users that would be using the platform occasionally. That was a different conversation and a different meeting. But for him, it just like totally changed the way that I'm kind of pitching things, I guess.
When you go to buy a burger, do you step into the kitchen, see how they prep it, see how they make the aioli, or do you just want a good burger? And if it's good, you'll just eat it, enjoy it, and write 5-star reviews on Google afterwards? No?
Yeah, pretty much.
They're the same. They're the same.
Yeah, no, it's very cool. And like I said, and you know how the data points to show you actually this is what it should be doing in the messaging. So that's really cool. I really don't like. We are going to do some more of this in the company with the other reps. If there is a future where instead of marketing running all the campaigns for everything, where there's a subset of campaigns run like 4 reps to generate their own leads, I think it's a very cool idea to go and experiment
Let's
with.
call it eat what you kill campaigns. It's basically you need to take care of the funnel from top to bottom.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting idea. Like, marketing still would do campaigns for awareness and all this kind of stuff, and maybe even for some lead gen. But really, if you can imagine a world, and I don't know if this will work or not, but I think it could, where like reps have their campaigns running, where they have they can easily view what campaigns for them are running. They can have a hand in picking the audience and the creatives. And then they are a much more aware situation when they get a lead, because they ran the ads. Like, they actually know which ads were running and why they picked the ads. So it's something I'm going to try and do here. We have a smaller team here, so I think it's a perfect size to kind of do it, and just to kind of see, right? And I think honestly, it could also remove one of the biggest points of friction is, like, lead quality, and like, hey, I'm not happy with the lead you send me, whoever, right? Well, now it's going to become, well, you're part of the campaign, let's fix it together, right? So, okay, so like, that's the feature I would like to see, where the account reps are actually running their own ad campaign with some budget that they own. Is this a feature, Eric, that you like? I'll say, like, you would like to see, or is this something that you think you would like to repeat again, right? Since you did this already once, or what do you think about that? And do you think this will help us, with the classical sales and marketing alignment topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think this was amazing, especially connecting with Jess, which we've talked a few times, and we definitely see each other on team meetings. But I feel like now we're like pretty tight, and we went through this like challenging experience, and we're actually, I mean, I'll be curious what Jess thinks, but I have like such a newfound respect for Jess and like the marketing role and what goes into all of this. And we're actually going to be meeting weekly now just to like share ideas. And I don't think that would have probably happened if we didn't go through this exercise. And hopefully Jess feels similarly, or I'm just going to be embarrassed.
No, definitely. The feeling's mutual, because I think before I only hear from the sales team about, hey, these are the leads that you gave me, just pretty much all the feedback from the sales team. This is the leads are not good, we need to improve, But now working together with Eric, and I feel like maybe other reps should also try experimenting. So it gives me new perspective on how to approach the messaging, and then also the audiences. So yeah, we'll be meeting weekly with Eric to share ideas from now on.
I mean, I think the cool part for this is that reps are in a unique position where they actually do talk with the prospects, live, right? And they actually do get to see, okay, what is this strategy working or not? Like, we could look at data and the number, the conversion rate, which is all important, but the feedback from reps and actually, this meeting happened with this person, I know they came from this ad, this was great. That kind of feedback, sometimes I would even argue, is more important even looking at the conversion on a form, right? Like rate, for example, or whatever. So having that alignment, having the reps be in charge of the campaigns, and having the constant talk between the reps and the person managing the campaigns, I think would be extremely useful if done right. And I think the part of this that really is cool to me is that ownership sense. If the rep feels like I own the campaign, maybe, right? Because this is not something usually own. Usually for them, it's just it's a line item the marketing team is doing because they have to. But the rep actually feels this is my campaign. You have your name on it. I think the sense of ownership might automatically or naturally just improve the alignment with the marketing person who's running the campaigns. So again, this is I'm not aware of any company who's doing this, where the rep has been given a budget to go and run ads for getting leads or whatever. So I'm not aware. If anyone out there hears this who's doing this one, I would love to hear. So it's kind of a cool initiative that we'll be doing some more of here. Adi, any last thoughts before we end in this podcast?
No, I think this was a great lesson of how we can all reach to the other end of the funnel and understand crazy things about the way the machine works. This was a really insightful session. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Jess, for joining us.
Thank you, guys. This was awesome. We'll conclude the second edition of Benchmark Brews, and we might do a follow-up again. So yeah, everyone, hopefully you've enjoyed your coffee and the talk, and until next time, thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Bye, everyone.